In the wake of every tragedy, there are things that are predictable. One of the things that's predictable is that you see some people engaging in, I think, partisan games and trying to blame their political opponents for a natural disaster. And you see that with a hurricane, with a tornado, with a wildfire, with this flooding, where people immediately say, well, the hurricane is Donald Trump's fault. Look, I think most normal Americans know that's ridiculous, and I think this is not a time for partisan finger-pointing and attacks. Now, after we come through search and rescue, after we come through the process of rebuilding, there will naturally be a period of retrospection where you look back and say, okay, what exactly transpired? What was the timeline? And what could have been done differently to prevent this loss of life? And that's a natural process. I think it should not happen in a bitter and partisan sense, but it should happen in a reasonable sense of saying, what lessons can we learn? And I will give an example. Houston's my hometown. If you live on the Gulf Coast, we get hurricanes. That's part of living on the Gulf Coast as hurricanes hit. And I do think Texas as a whole has learned over time how to deal more effectively with hurricanes. And so you look here, we know the National Weather Service put out an emergency warning just after 1 a.m. and a second emergency warning just after 4 a.m. Now, obviously, most people at 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. are asleep. And so I think we will have a reasonable conversation about, A, are there any ways to have earlier detection? And some of that, the limits of a flash flood, they're very difficult because they can arise so quickly. But everyone would agree in hindsight, if we could go back and do it again, we would evacuate particularly those in the most vulnerable areas, the young children in the cabins closest to the water. We would remove them and get them to higher ground if we could go back and do it again. Obviously, everyone would. The people in RVs by the river's edge. We know in disasters like this, RVs and mobile homes are particularly susceptible, whether a flood or a hurricane or a tornado, they're particularly susceptible to that. And so my hope is, in time, we will learn some lessons to implement to next time, and there will be another flood, there will be another disaster, but next time there's a flood, I hope we have in place processes to remove especially the most vulnerable from harm's way.